Everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Blue Line Report. As you guys might notice, I'm on my own this episode without Jake. Jake is busy covering a Chicago Cubs game for his school. He's currently in journalism school at Northwestern. So, as a replacement, if you will, we are joined by Steven. You may know him as one of the co-hosts of Broadway Block, and he is also one of the newest Blue Line Station contributors. So, I guess welcome, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So why don't you, I guess, tell us a little bit, about like your background, kind of what you do and why you decided to join Blue Line Station.
So my co-host and I, Joe, we've been running the Broadway block for now. This is our fourth year. Diehard Rangers fans. This is kind of the way that we would connect, is we would just call each other, talk about the sport, talk about the moves that happen, and did you see this play versus that? And one day my wife just kind of was like, you guys should just do this, record it, make an excuse to have this conversation. You already do it every day. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. Been very active on social media, and the amount of people that we've met doing this has been a blast. So enthusiastic to continue to share that with you guys. And again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, like I said, we're really excited to kind of collab with you. And then I guess why don't you kind of also get into like what made you kind of want to reach out to me to kind of start writing with Blue Line Station and kind of show that you're in addition to having a voice, on podcasts, you also have a voice through writing as well.
Yeah, I don't know why it just kind of felt like the natural progression, like the next step in what we do to document what we're already talking about. And you've been supportive, and a lot of other people have been supportive, like kind of lending advice because it's kind of dipping my toes in, so to speak, to this new avenue to it. But it does seem like a good way to get those thoughts out and even kind of preemptively plan for the episodes that we're going to record. We're already kind of like chewing over some topics and ideas and stuff. So it's been great.
Yeah, awesome. I guess, we'll get into kind of your first article that you did for us in a minute, but I guess, as we're recording on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, we kind of got some breaking news to cover in that the Rangers have just announced a multi-year extension for president and general manager Chris Drury. I have the quote from James Dolan staring at me, so I'm going to go ahead and read it for us and the listeners. I am pleased that Chris will continue to lead the Rangers hockey operations in his role as president and general manager, James Dolan said via press release. Over his tenure, Chris has shown passion for the Rangers, relentless work ethic, and a tireless pursuit of excellence. While we are all disappointed in what transpired this past season, I am confident in his ability to guide this organization to success. So, yeah, that news broke just about like 15 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, I want to say. So, I guess, Steven, why don't you start us off with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think something we talked about on our most recent episode of the Broadway block was that it doesn't seem to be a surprise to anybody that Laviolette let go rather, but I also am a little puzzled by why however many people thought that Drury would be let go, that it just didn't happen. And I was pretty confident that he would stay as the Rangers GM, but it is to me a little bit puzzling why so many people thought it would just happen immediately after letting go of the coach. It kind of seems like something you do in one move, and letting go of the coach first and then kind of letting Drury around for a few weeks of time. What would that do good for the organization? So to me, it kind of felt like once Laviolette was officially released, that Drury more than likely punched his time clock for at least one more year. The multi-year extension, I think, might have a lot of people puzzled at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what you're saying in that, like, I don't think it would have made sense for them to have both been let go with the timing of Lavi's firing compared to, this announcement with Chris. I think the reason why we saw a lot of fans, New York Rangers fans, obviously, specifically, like, I don't know if wanting that is the right word, but like expecting that, like that they had false expectations for that was simply just because of, what happened this past season, kind of making NHL infamy in, not qualifying for the playoffs after winning the President's Cup. So, I mean, I think there's just a lot of disappointment all around. I will say I do think it's interesting that James Dolan, like in his press release, acknowledged the disappointment. I think he kind of did that because he knows that there's going to be a lot of fans who are probably like not happy with this decision. Like I remember I was looking at Molly Walker of the New York Post's tweet or X where she announced this, like she announced the quote and people were saying April Fools was like 20 days ago or whatever. So yeah, I thought that was funny, but I mean overall, I think it sounded like from what the guys were saying at breakup day that without directly saying it, they were kind of implying that they felt Peter was kind of the main like iceberg, if you will. I don't know if you agree with that, but like I fully expected Chris to stay on.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of Rangers fans wanted to see Drury go.
Hmm.
I don't know if I agree with it. It's something we've also touched on the show a few times that it does seem like there's too much going on, and that would be too much of a like a rocky boat. And it felt like he would stick around at least for another year. But again, I am a little bit bewildered by a multi-year extension. I did not see that coming. I don't think this was on anybody's bingo card for, yeah, like you said, 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night. But here we are. And I think for better or for worse, James Dolan is more than likely given Drury some marching orders over this last season and the last seasons that corresponded before that. That I just feel like they have to have had conversation and been on the same page for what's happening to have Dolan agree that this was a good trajectory moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly interesting moves. I'm excited to see kind of what off-season moves are going to be made, you know, who's going to stay, who's going to go, and kind of the development of those players that like, especially those younger guys like of Gabe, you know, of Matt, seeing, you know, just kind of what transpires during the off-season. And I think the reason why they got the Drewy news out, like in regards to that he's staying, is so like that can kind of be now that's the main focus of all of the fans. Not only the fans, but I guess the players too now.
Yeah, and to your point about the exit interviews, it did seem like everyone was kind of honest about the way that these things have affected them, um, except for maybe Fox. His comments were kind of along the lines of like it kind of seemed like this caught him off guard that Laviolette was fired because he kind of stood up for the message. He didn't say the message was lost. He didn't say the message was misunderstood. He blamed himself and the players for not carrying out the message that Laviolette had. So it does seem like at least some people are a little bit more happy in the room than others. Mika Zibanejad was one of those guys that cited the trades of Drury or that Drury made rather for getting rid of Truba, namely, and Goodrow in the offseason to things that kind of really negatively affected him. So that's tough to hear, especially considering Mika's kind of always one of those guys that seems to like feed off of the hype of something good or the negativity. So for better or for worse, he's around for another few years, and we'll see what moves he has up his sleeves for the remainder of the offseason.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, and kind of transitioning into what Drury, you know, has to work with, you know, he's got big shoes to kind of like fill in the sense of fans' hopes and dreams next year, you know. I guess let's transition to your first article that you wrote for us, which was your giant report card for the 2024 to 25 New York Rangers. You gave them a D minus. Completely agree with you there. Specifically, the defense got I believe it was a D. Why don't you just, I guess, talk about the overall grade you gave them and why?
Yeah, so starting with high marks, the goaltending tandem of Igor and Quick, I think the two of them collectively gave us a chance to win every night that they were in net. I think a lot of the blame goes to the defense and can make some of those numbers look a little bit worse. For example, Igor was first in the league in saves and first in the league in shots against. So what does that tell you? That the defense surrenders a lot of chances and he has to constantly bail them out. So Igor's numbers, while at a glance may not look the same way that he was in his Vesna season, he gave us a chance, and that's all you can ask. Every night there were so many saves that we would watch, like, how are we even in this game? And a lot of it came down to failing to capitalize on offense. I gave the offense a little bit higher marks than what my friends have texted me I should have given them, but it is not
Hey, the
missed on
power
me.
play got an F though, so that's,
Yeah, well, I mean, that
props.
is truly disappointing. I think everyone, I even tweeted out a couple times when we were on the power play that this is a great chance to go to the bathroom and maybe freshen up your water or
Go
something.
like get your snack, refill
Yeah,
your drink
because
or whatever.
we all knew what was going to happen. Compared to what was a lethal power play for the Rangers, top three in the league just the season before. And I think in seasons prior to that, even we expected more than what we saw this season. Um, the offense in general scored more goals than the Florida Panthers did, but it gets missed when defensive lapses create more chances against than your team can bail you out of. So my dad is a diehard New York Rangers fan. He's somebody I can kind of pinpoint my fandom to. And one of the things that he kind of always told me was like, if your goalie keeps it 3 goals or less, your team had a shot at winning. And when you ring one off the post and it comes back the other way and it's in your net, it's really deflating for the whole bench. Like everyone kind of senses that the game should have been ours, coulda, shoulda, woulda. So I felt a lot of that embodiment this season for the New York Rangers and failing to not only capitalize on an opportunity, but of course it comes back the other way. And Igor was being asked to do a lot. I mean, he was one of 4 goalies in the league that had 60 plus starts. Really, really strong numbers for anyone in that category. But the issue is ultimately, Laviolette also got a poor grade. I don't think as much as it was a nice thing for Fox to say, I don't know if it's necessarily true that the message certainly seemed lost. There were moments where Laviolette couldn't come up with an answer. You know, he told reporters point blank, I don't have a message for you. I don't have a message for this room. I don't even go in the
Even go in
locker
the
room.
locker room, yeah.
Right. So things like that, I think, lend itself to a bad grade. I think overall, this team felt way flat of expectations. And I mean, coming into this year, they were a percentage favorite on betting apps to win it all. And, you know, that doesn't happen unless the majority of people think that that's the case. So
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything you just said and want to give you a big shout out for your first article with Blue Line Station. I thought
thanks.
it was really good. And like I said, we're lucky to have you. I guess I do want to throw out like one name out there. If you had to give just Chris Kreider a grade for this year, what would you give him?
Well, if you asked me that question before we learned that he's been playing the season with a broken wrist and vertigo, I would have maybe been a little bit harsher, but it's tough to grade somebody like Kreider who has always been a heart and soul player
Mhm.
and didn't really seem like he showed that same skill set this season of being always the guy to be like the catalyst. Um, I'd have to grade him pretty poorly, unfortunately, like a D plus. Like there were moments he started off hot,
Is that
but
just clarifying, that's your grade like with the broken wrist?
yeah, I mean, like
Okay.
if we're gonna be objective about it, yes. I
Okay.
think before that it's hard to not give him an F. But then you learn these things and you want to try to be nice about it, but it's tough because results speak. You can't applaud somebody based off of the last 12 years of their career. You can only, if we're only going to talk about right now, yeah, it's tough to give them a passing grade, really.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I asked that because I kind of want us to go into the general topic of do we want to see him stay? At exit day, he's basically said that this is home for him, like this organization is home for him, basically saying like this playing for the New York Rangers has been his dream for so long and how he's basically grown up as a blue shirt. And I feel like you're going to disagree with me here, but I personally want to see him stay. Like I want to see him have another season. And while I agree that obviously like his grade was not his best marks this season, to put it lightly, I do think having a player who is kind of like the heart and soul, like you were talking about, like in the locker room does mean something. You know, Matt Rempe was saying that Kreider was the person he trained with in the off season last summer. And you kind of learn that, with Gabe coming up from Boston College and how he's able to kind of relate to Chris with that, who's also coming from Boston College. Like, I kind of like that side of sports where it's not always about the statistics and about the analytics, where it's also about the heart and their leadership they're bringing off the ice and in the locker room. So I do think, like, I personally would like to see him here for one more season, but I feel like I'm going to get like crucified for that take.
No, I mean like you're allowed to have favorites. I don't blame anyone for latching on to players in any way. I mean, I think some of my earliest memories as a Rangers fan is has been directly on to certain players. Um, One thing about Kreider is, like you said, he has made himself available and done all of those little things while also being an assistant captain and being a presence and mentoring the youth and all that. But I do think that you're going to find that in any given hockey room, like at the professional level with as many players as there are in the league. I don't think you're going to find a team that doesn't attempt to foster the youth. I don't think you're going to find a team that goes out of their way to line you up with someone who's going to give you hard knocks when you need a little love. I think the Rangers locker room right now is maybe one of the messiest in the league. So the fact that you have somebody in Kreider who is willing to spend the time and train with these guys and stick out the olive branch, I think that you're going to find that with the next guy as well. But I think through dark times like we're in, that's a guy that stands out because he was willing to do that. And
Yeah.
Gabe is somebody that you can't really afford to roll the dice on ruining, right? Like the Rangers have the reputation of ruining prospects and not allowing them the time to grow. But at the same time, in that breath, Kreider was also playing with a broken wrist and vertigo while Gabe was sitting on the bench. So like I would have maybe liked to see the actual adult move, which is like, hey man, get out there. We're already mathematically eliminated from this thing. You should
Yeah.
probably be playing.
I agree with that, but that's another reason why I kind of think that parting ways with Lavi was the right call. Like, I get what you're saying, but I don't necessarily think the blame there should be placed on Kreider. Like, sure, if Kreider wasn't there, would Gabe get that playing time? Like, yes, but at the end of the day, like, that's also a coach's call to make. And so that obviously that wasn't the right one, but depending on who they bring in, if should Kreider stay for another year, because that's really what he was saying and during his exit day was that he wants to stay. So, obviously the like rumblings during their last game was that it could have been his last game. You saw the players like when they could like pick up a puck and like give it to Chris to like keep. So I think everyone knows that it's a possibility that it was his last game, but I think he's kind of at the point now where he's saying he wants to stay.
Yeah, I agree with that. But and I think this is the real issue with the broken system of the New York Rangers, right? Everybody wants to point to Laviolette, and I'm not making fun of you by saying this. I think this is something I've heard a few times, and maybe it's just you saying that made me think of this. That it is Laviolette's job to make the lineup, but it is your job as a player to recluse yourself, Brendan Schneider included, or Braden Schneider included, Barclay Goodrow, Jacob Trouba. How many times have we had a season end where someone's playing on a fractured foot and it's maybe the medical staff's job to pass them or not? But if they've been passed and they know they're going to play, if they don't say anything and the coach puts them in the lineup, I do think that 25% of the onus goes on to the player. And when you got, again, guys like Dahan who were brought in to play and sit, play 3 games after being traded for, and then you have guys like Braden Schneider who are getting surgery the minute the offseason starts, I think that's irresponsible. And I think that
I
that's
agree with that.
what we're talking about on a broader scale is that there is, it's like you're just doing your job and your manager told you, like, keep doing it this way, but you know what you're doing is the wrong thing. At what point as a human do you just say, like, I don't feel like this is what I ought to be doing? I don't think that we should be cleaning with just water and not cleaning solution. Like this kind of feels wrong, right? Where do you step in and say the maybe the wrong thing at the time, but the right thing as a person?
Yeah. I mean, that's completely fair, but I think what how to kind of end this topic is the fact that this is a developing story, like what's going to happen is what's going to happen. And I think regardless of whether he stays or whether, this was it, I think that's something that is going, like Chris Kreider as a Ranger is going to be talked about for decades, like
Absolutely.
period. So I think that's what matters. And I think it's just a matter of seeing what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. I no knock on Kreider. I'm one of the few that you're gonna find on social media batting away the millions of people that want to dunk on this dude just because he had one bad season as if he wasn't. I mean, I did a deeper dive in his stats in the last 15 years. You can scale it back to he's number 25 in goals, and
Mhm.
there's like Anze Kopitar, Patrice Bergeron. The guys in his company are no doubt respected by their franchises, and I think we should do the same for Kreider.
Absolutely. I will say, like, my favorite, like, New York Rangers Twitter/X account is, I don't know what the ad is, but like the person who's like the Chris Kreider respecter, or who like posts all of the memes. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think like I just think that account like makes me smile. So I think as a result of that, I've developed some bias towards Kreider.
the profile picture itself is what gets me. The
Yes,
little
no,
turnaround, it'll yeah.
I completely agree. And, continuing on a humorous note, I don't know if you've watched any of our podcast episodes, but we do a kind of like keeping up with the Kardashians inspired like segment, but it's keeping up with the Rempies instead, where I talk about like what's going on with Matt Rempe and his sister, Ali Rempe. Because I don't know if you know this, Stephen, but Ali Rempe is like a really active like content creator in like girl world, like in like the girl side of like TikTok and like Instagram and everything. She's like a regular like influencer and content creator. So for those looking to see what she's doing, she just went to Coachella. Thought that was super cool, like way to celebrate your brother entering the off season. She went to Coachella. There's actually three Rumpies. So there's Matt, and then he has two sisters. The other sister is named Steph, and Allie was saying that like Steph randomly like called her while she was at Coachella and was like, "You need to like look out for your bank account. Like I'm concerned like for your finances." So I thought that was hilarious. But I guess transitioning back to Matt, I do want to announce that Blue Line Station is doing a report card series. We really liked how your general report card went over that we're giving each individual player their own report card. So I haven't had the inspiration yet, but tomorrow I am going to write Matt Rempe's report card. So I did say that last podcast episode we released, we gave Will Cooley and Matt Rempe the two most improved Rangers of the year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think something we also touched on in our last episode is that Will Cooley, I think, embodies and represents what a lot of Rangers fans have been clamoring for, is somebody who can really stir the pot, if you will. And I mean, he breaks Callahan's hit record, so it shows you he's not afraid to go to the dirty areas. And the way he delivers the hits, I mean, they look unassuming until the other person looks like they've just been involved in a car accident. And to pot 20 goals in addition to being that kind of threat is a player that we've sorely missed, I think, in the lineup because everybody kind of brings up the grit and the size, and there's that side of Rangers Twitter that talks about just those specific players. And while Matt Rempe obviously falls into the former of those boxes, I think Cooley can do so while also being a very effective player and not a player that you can really argue is effective. Where I would argue Matt Rempe's effective, but not in the way that Cooley is,
Yeah,
and
and
especially
that's backed
considering
up by Cooley's stats because like
right,
if you look at it
precisely
statistically, like if we were to take everything else out of it purely based on analytics, like hands down, Will is the most improved player, just simply based on his point totals and like how those grew throughout the season.
correct. And I also think his utilization was, again, if there's any props that I can give Laviolette that I attempted to in my report card give him as much credit as possible, knowing that the score would be pretty low. And one of the things that I highlighted was that I do appreciate the willingness to mix it up, shuffle the deck, find a position that a player can play in that would work. Shifting Mika to the wing was a move that I don't think any Rangers coach previously would have thought to do, and nobody has since Mika's been on the roster. But in the moment where you get a bona fide center that can play in that position in a better way than he can, and that can actually complement his skill sets, I think it was obviously the right move to make. In the topic of Will Cooley, he bumps him up to the top six, and he saw a lot more ice time than he would have. He also kind of can stay as that third line, second line winger that moves up and slots in depending on the matchup or what's going on. So I would look to Will Cooley being in the top six for sure next year, if not splitting time like he was on the third line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good point that we'll go ahead and like end the episode there. To our listeners, keep tuning in to bluelinestation.com to read all things New York Rangers related and stay tuned for our upcoming report card and series inspired by you, Stephen. So I guess yeah, thank you again for joining us. Yeah, this was episode 4, so thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and let's go Rangers.